Every evening in the small coastal town of Clearwater, the same old man could be seen sitting on a rusted metal bench at the bus stop near Harbor Street. At first glance, he looked like someone time had forgotten. His shoulders curved forward, his hands steady but aged, and his eyes always watching the horizon as if waiting for something that would never come. His clothes were simple, usually an old jacket, faded jeans, and a cap that had clearly seen better days. Most people who passed him never thought twice about who he was. To them, he was just another old man with nowhere to go. Some whispered, "Poor guy," completely washed up. Others simply ignored him, assuming he had no story left to tell. But a few people noticed something unusual. Even though he looked tired, his movements were surprisingly steady, and his eyes, when they briefly met yours, carried a sharpness that didn't match his quiet appearance. His name was Jack Rourke, 71 years old. He lived alone in a small rented room not far from the coast, surviving on a modest pension and whatever part-time jobs he could find. Every morning he rose before sunrise, walked to the pier, and helped fishermen pull in their nets. He never asked for payment, only smiled and said, "Just keeping these old bones moving." But Jack's life was far from ordinary. Decades earlier, he had been known in the Navy SEALs by a chilling nickname whispered among his teammates, Iron Ghost. A man who completed missions that never made the news, survived operations so dangerous his records were locked away. But these were pieces of a past he never spoke about, not once, not to anyone in Clearwater. He chose a quiet life now, a simple life, one that didn't require strength or recognition. Every day he carried a small cloth bag filled with food scraps and sandwiches. He walked the streets feeding stray cats and dogs, leaving food outside the old community shelter, and buying warm tea for the homeless near the old train station. People often saw him sitting with them, listening patiently to their stories even when they didn't make much sense. Some said he was lonely. Others said he was wasting his time, but Jack believed kindness was never wasted. He'd lived through enough violence to know that gentleness was worth more than strength. One of the few people who spoke to him regularly was Emily, a 17-year-old girl who passed by the bus stop every evening on her way home from work. At first, she was a bit afraid of him. His silent presence, the way he sat so still, made him look strange. But one day she saw him kneel down to help a limping stray dog, wrapping its injured paw with a piece of cloth from his own shirt. The care in his hands surprised her. "Are you a doctor or something?" she asked shyly. Jack chuckled softly. "No, just someone who believes everyone deserves a little kindness." From that day onward, Emily began greeting him whenever she passed by. Sometimes she sat with him for a few minutes, telling him about her tiring day at work or how stressed she felt about school. Jack always listened quietly. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were calm and strangely comforting. One afternoon, when Emily watched him hand a sandwich to a homeless man, she said, "You're too kind, sir. People don't usually care like this." Jack's expression softened. "Kindness is free, Emily, and it saves more lives than bullets." She didn't fully understand his words, but they stayed in her mind. Something about the way he said them made it feel like he was speaking from deep experience, the kind that only comes from surviving darkness. The townspeople, however, never looked beyond what they saw. Teenagers sometimes made fun of him. "Hey, old man, waiting for the bus to nowhere," they would shout. Jack never reacted. He had learned long ago that anger only feeds fire. Still, he wasn't invisible. A few older veterans in town nodded respectfully when passing him. Some even recognized the small tattoo on his wrist, barely visible, but unmistakably military. They didn't ask questions, and Jack didn't offer answers. Despite everything, Jack never stopped showing kindness. Every day he visited the same stray cat, an orange one, eared Tom he named Captain. He whistled a soft tune, and the cat would trot over, rubbing against his leg while he laughed quietly. People wondered why he sat at the bus stop every evening. Some thought he was waiting for a bus that never came. Others assumed he wanted company. But the truth was simple. That bench was where he'd last sat with his late wife before illness took her away. He came there every day not out of sadness, but to feel close to the memories that kept him going. Emily eventually learned this when she saw him looking at an old photograph folded neatly in his wallet. A younger Jack in uniform stood beside a smiling woman. He quickly closed the wallet when he realized she was watching. "Someone special?" she asked. Jack nodded slowly. "The best person I ever knew." There was a silence, soft and respectful. Life in Clearwater continued like usual, quiet, simple, and uneventful. But underneath that calm surface was a moment approaching, a moment that would shake the whole town and reveal the truth about the man people called washed up. No one knew that the seemingly frail old man sitting at the bus stop was still capable of things that belonged in another world. A world of danger, a world of discipline, a world of survival. And soon, the town would see exactly who Jack Rourke used to be, and why you never underestimate a man who has spent his life protecting others. The night things went wrong started like any other in Clearwater quiet, cold, and wrapped in the kind of stillness that makes streetlights look lonely. Emily had stayed late at her part-time job at a small cafe on Harbor Street. Her shift ended at 10 p.m., and she stepped outside with tired feet and cold hands, hugging her backpack close as she began the long walk home. She usually felt safe in Clearwater. It wasn't a dangerous town, just a bit neglected. But that night, something felt different. As she walked past the closed shops and dim alleys, she heard the low growl of an engine. At first, she ignored it, thinking someone else was going home too. But when she turned the corner, the engine turned too. She slowed, the engine slowed, her heartbeat began to climb. A black car, an older model with a dented bumper, rolled behind her at an unnervingly slow pace. Before she could convince herself she was imagining things, the car sped forward just enough for her to see who was inside. 3 local troublemakers, boys barely older than 20, known in Clearwater for petty crimes, harassment, and the kind of stupidity that grew from boredom and arrogance. People in town avoided them. Even the police didn't bother much, since their crimes were small and hard to prove. But Emily had heard stories about phones stolen from students, wallets snatched in the market, girls chased for fun. She had hoped never to meet them. "Hey there," one of the boys shouted out the window. Walking alone tonight, Emily's stomach dropped. She quickened her steps, clutching her bag. "Relax." The boy called again, mocking, "We just want to talk." The car rolled closer, too close. Emily felt panic rising sharp in her throat. She turned down a narrower street, hoping to reach the main road where at least some cars might pass. But the car followed easily, like a hunter knowing its prey had nowhere to go. "Why you running? That's rude." Another boy laughed, leaning out the window. Emily's breath trembled. She didn't want to show fear, but her legs were already shaking. She scanned the area desperately for anyone at all. But the shops were closed, the houses dark, and the streets silent. Then she remembered something. The bus stop. Old Jack always sat there, no matter how late it was. If she could get there, maybe she wouldn't be alone. She changed direction and started running, faster than she ever had before. The boys shouted, annoyed now, and the car screeched as it swung around to cut her off. Her lungs burned as she sprinted. She didn't stop to think she ran toward the only person she trusted to be awake at this hour. The man everyone thought was harmless, the one people called washed up. When she reached the bus stop, she nearly burst into tears. Jack was there, sitting exactly as he always did, feeding Captain, the one-eared stray cat that lounged beside him. The soft glow of the streetlight fell across his face, making him look like a painting from another time. Peaceful, still, almost fragile, but the moment Jack heard Emily's voice gasping his name, the peaceful stillness broke. He stood up slowly, but with a precision that didn't match an old man's body. His posture straightened, shoulders pulling back, eyes narrowing like someone flipping a switch deep inside. Captain the cat ran off at the sudden tension. Emily stumbled toward him out of breath. "Jack, they're following me." Jack didn't ask questions. He didn't look confused. He simply looked past her. The black car screeched to a stop just a few feet away. The 3 boys stepped out, swaggering with forced confidence. They looked at Jack and burst into laughter. "You kidding me?" The tallest one said. "This fossil is your protector." Another smirked. "Let's move him out of the way." Emily felt terror grip her chest. She grabbed Jack's arm. "Please, let's go inside somewhere." But Jack didn't move. He stood like a statue carved from something unbreakable. The tallest boy walked up and jabbed Jack's shoulder. "Hey, old man, this ain't your business." Jack's face didn't change. He didn't flinch, but his eyes, Emily noticed at first, were not the soft, gentle eyes she was used to. They had hardened into something sharp, trained, focused. Eyes belonging to someone who had seen violence many times before. "Walk away," Jack said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, a warning wrapped in calm. The boys scoffed, or what? The second one mocked. "You gonna hit us with your cane?" Jack didn't respond. He stepped slightly in front of Emily, shielding her with the smoothness of muscle memory. Emily felt a strange warmth of safety, like stepping under a shelter during a storm. But the boys weren't backing off. The tallest one pushed Jack again, harder this time. "Move, Grandpa." Jack's pupils tightened as if measuring distance, angles, speed. Emily didn't know it, but in that moment, Jack wasn't seeing three reckless young men. His instincts, buried for years, had already categorized their threats, their stances, their weaknesses. For the first time in decades, the Iron Ghost was awake. The boys thought they were harassing a harmless senior. They had no idea they were standing inches away from a man trained to handle far worse than petty criminals, and the moment they laid hands on him, they were about to learn why you never ever touch a former SEAL. The cold night air felt heavier as the three boys circled around Jack, unaware that they were seconds away from a mistake they would never forget. Emily stood behind him, trembling, holding the strap of her bag like a lifeline. She wanted to run, scream, do anything, but something in the stillness of Jack's posture held her frozen. It wasn't fear she sensed from him. It was focus, a calmness so controlled it felt almost unnatural. The tallest boy stepped closer, puffing out his chest to show dominance. "We don't have time for this," he said. "Move." Jack didn't move. He simply replied, "Last warning. Walk away." The tone of his voice wasn't loud, but it carried the sharp edge of a blade. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a final line drawn in the sand. The second boy snorted. "Old man, you think you can scare us." He reached out, grabbing Jack's jacket. The next moment happened so fast that Emily didn't fully see it. She only heard the sickening sound of impact. Jack's hand shot up with speed no one expected from someone his age. He twisted the boy's wrist in a motion so precise, so practiced, that the attacker's knees buckled instantly. A sharp cry tore from his lungs as he collapsed to the pavement, clutching his arm. Emily gasped. The tallest boy took a stunned step back. The third one blinked, unsure what he had just witnessed. Jack stood unmoving, as if he hadn't done anything at all. The first boy rolled on the ground, groaning in pain. How did he? Before he could finish, the tallest boy charged, swinging his fist. It was a strong punch, fueled by anger and embarrassment. But Jack sidestepped smoothly, almost gracefully, letting the punch cut through empty air. Then, with a movement so effortless it looked unreal, Jack pressed two fingers into the attacker's shoulder joint and turned slightly. The boy howled as his arm locked up, pain shooting through his body like electricity. He staggered, clutching his shoulder, unable to lift his arm. Emily stared at Jack in disbelief. She had known him as the kind old man who fed stray cats, who smiled softly, who listened without judgment. Now she was seeing someone else. Someone sharper, faster, colder. Someone dangerous. The last boy standing felt his courage drain away. He stepped back, eyes wide. "What are you?" he whispered. Jack looked at him, calm and unwavering. "Someone who doesn't want to hurt you. Leave." But panic and pride twisted inside the remaining attacker. Fear pushed him to do something stupid. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small knife, not large, but sharp enough to cause real harm. Emily gasped again. Jack's eyes flicked to the blade, and in that instant his entire presence changed. His breathing slowed, his stance shifted. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was anticipating. The boy lunged. Jack moved. In a blink, he caught the attacker's wrist, twisted it outward, and pressed his thumb against a nerve bundle. The boy dropped the knife as if his hand had been burned. Jack kicked the weapon away. then swept his leg in a tight, controlled arc. The attacker's feet left the ground, and he fell hard onto his back with a thud that echoed through the empty street. Silence fell. All three boys were now on the ground, one clutching his wrist, another his shoulder, the last one gasping for breath, staring at Jack like he was staring at a ghost. Emily felt her heart racing. She didn't know whether to be terrified or amazed. Jack didn't look winded. He didn't even look tense. He stood there with the calm of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. A man who knew exactly how to neutralize threats without causing permanent harm. "You attacked a girl," Jack said quietly, his voice steady but firm. "That's something I don't allow." The tallest boy, still holding his shoulder, managed to speak. Who are you?" Jack's gaze turned distant for a moment, as if pulled into memories he had buried long ago. Then he answered simply, "Someone who spent a lifetime learning how to protect people." Emily approached him slowly, her voice trembling. "Jack, you didn't even look scared." Jack turned toward her, his expression softening again, the hardness in his eyes melting back into warmth. "Fear never disappears," he said gently. "You just learn how to walk through it." She looked at the three boys groaning on the ground. They had completely underestimated him. Everyone had. To the town, he was nothing more than a lonely old man waiting for a bus that never came. But Emily now understood that Jack had been something much more, something powerful, something disciplined, something extraordinary. Jack bent down and picked up the knife, folding it and placing it far out of reach. Then he stepped back, his posture relaxed again. It was as if the fight had never happened, but the boys felt it, their pride shattered, their arrogance crushed, their bodies aching. One of them whispered, barely audible, "He's not normal. He's a monster." Jack looked at him, and for the first time his expression sharpened. Not with anger, but with a seriousness that could freeze blood. "I'm not a monster," he said. "I'm a man who knows what damage monsters can do, and I refuse to become one." Emily watched him, realizing that he had held back. He could have hurt them much more. He could have broken bones, ended the fight violently, but he didn't. Every move had been controlled, efficient, and protective, not cruel. The distant wail of police sirens began to echo from the main road. Jack took a slow breath and said to Emily, "It's over. You're safe now." And for the first time in her life, Emily believed completely, not because he fought like a warrior, but because he stood like a guardian. Jack Rourke, the man everyone called washed up, had just shown the truth. He was a former SEAL, a man trained to walk through chaos, a man built for danger, a man who never stopped protecting those who needed it. The night's events quickly became the talk of Clearwater, though Jack never sought attention. News spread in whispers, first the story of the old man at the bus stop who had effortlessly stopped 3 attackers in their tracks. Soon it became headlines, "Local man stops attacker's former SEAL." Some townspeople were skeptical, others curious, but Jack didn't care about the rumors. He hadn't acted for recognition or fame. He had acted because it was the right thing to do. The next morning, Emily arrived at the bus stop, finding Jack already there as if nothing had happened. Captain, the one-eared stray cat, purred at his feet. She hesitated for a moment, unsure how to approach. Finally, she spoke. "Everyone's talking about you, about what happened last night." Jack looked up, his expression calm. "Let them talk. I didn't do it for anyone else." Emily sat down beside him, her hands trembling slightly. "But you saved me. You didn't even hurt them. You just stopped them." Jack smiled faintly. "That's the difference between control and chaos, Emily. People think strength is measured by how hard you hit, but real strength is knowing when not to." Over the next few days, more people began approaching Jack. The police visited, asking for a statement about the attackers. Local reporters came with cameras and microphones, hoping for a sensational story. Jack politely declined all interviews. "I didn't fight them." He said repeatedly, "I stopped them. There's a difference." Even though he refused attention, his quiet courage inspired the town. People began noticing him differently. The elderly, who once ignored him, now greeted him warmly. Shopkeepers who had dismissed him offered coffee or small meals. Children waved at him when they passed. Veterans recognized the faint tattoo on his wrist, a small emblem of service, and saluted him silently, their eyes filled with respect and understanding. Emily continued to visit him every day. She would sit on the bench while he fed Captain, asking questions about his life. Slowly, Jack began to open up, but only enough to teach lessons, never to boast. He told her about discipline, about patience, about how small acts of kindness could ripple farther than any act of violence. He didn't talk about the missions or the danger he had faced. He only spoke about responsibility, the responsibility to protect, to choose mercy, and to help others whenever possible. Inspired by Jack, Emily started a small volunteer initiative in Clearwater. She gathered friends from school, neighbors, and anyone willing to help. They delivered food to the elderly, cleaned streets, and offered support to veterans who had come home with little recognition or assistance. Jack never joined formally, but he watched quietly, occasionally offering guidance when asked. He never wanted credit, but he was always there, a silent guardian of their efforts. The three attackers faced consequences from the law, but the story of Jack's restraint spread further than any punishment could. It became a lesson for the town. Courage is not measured by aggression, and heroes are not always those who seek glory. They are often the ones who act in quiet, selfless ways. One day, as Emily walked to the bus stop, she noticed Jack sitting there, as always. She sat beside him, looking at the horizon where the sun reflected off the ocean waves. "Do you ever get tired of being you?" she asked, a small smile on her face. Jack chuckled softly. "Tired, maybe, but life is about choices. I choose kindness, I choose patience, and when I must, I choose action. It's not the years in your body that matter, Emily. It's the discipline in your mind, the courage in your heart." Emily thought about last night, about the three attackers on the ground, about the way Jack had moved with precision and control. "I don't think people will ever see you the same way again," she said. Jack looked at her, eyes calm and wise. "Let them see what they want. I don't live for their understanding. I live to do what's right, and that's enough." In the weeks that followed, Clearwater began to change subtly. People smiled at strangers. They offered help to those in need. Acts of kindness, inspired by one quiet man, began to ripple through the town like gentle waves in the ocean. Veterans received recognition in small ways: a cup of coffee, a nod of respect, a simple thank you. And children learned that courage was not always loud or violent, but often quiet, steady, and selfless. Jack remained at his bench, feeding Captain, watching the world with the same calm, observant eyes. People no longer whispered "washed up" when they passed. They whispered admiration, respect, and sometimes quiet awe. One evening, Emily approached him with a small notebook. "I started writing down everything you've taught me," she said. "All the lessons, all the stories. I want to share them so others can learn too." Jack took the notebook gently, opening it and glancing at her neat handwriting. "Good," he said simply. "Remember, Emily, true strength isn't what you take, it's what you give. Protect, serve, and act with kindness, and you will always be remembered, even if no one else notices." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. She understood now what he had been trying to show her all along. The battles he had fought were not just in foreign lands or on dangerous missions. They were battles of the heart, battles of conscience, and battles of character. And in winning those, he had protected more lives than anyone would ever know. Jack Rourke, the old man who had once been called washed up, had changed a town, not with weapons, not with fame, not with loud displays of power, but with quiet courage, selfless action, and unwavering kindness. And for the people of Clearwater, the lesson was clear. You never underestimate kindness, and you never underestimate a man who has spent his life protecting others, quietly, patiently, and with extraordinary discipline. The legend of Jack Rourke, the Iron Ghost, lived on not as a story of war, but as a story of hope, courage, and the transformative power of one man's selfless life.